Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. We've made it very easy for you. We put a link in here that bypasses that Apple upcharge. So go to the description, click on the link, click through, pay your $2.99 for the first month, give it a shot. This is where you will find Heat Talk all day long. Also, 11 exclusive channels. That includes a Sioux Falls channel, a transaction channel. Every angle of the Heat is covered here, not just by us, but by fellow fans. So check it out. Get off of Twitter and the other social media apps. Check out Off the Floor. Find the link right here in the description. This episode is specially sponsored by Underdog. Join the more than 5 million happy players and $2 billion won. Check it out. You can play over or under on various players like Tyler Herro, maybe over 22.5 points. Maybe Jimmy Butler. You like him now as one of your plays. You can check it out at Underdog. Download the app and join more than 5 million fans already playing on Underdog. You can use the code 5, F-I-V-E. That's the code 5. You know that code. You get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. There's a lot more to play on the Underdog app. Trust me, I've checked the whole thing out. Contests, all kinds of stuff that you can check out on Underdog. So download the app today. Use the code 5. Get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Here's the thing. You must be 18 or 19 in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 in Colorado for some games, 21 in Massachusetts or Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit www.ncpgambling.org. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome into 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and 5 Reasons Sports. We got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. A couple of news items here. You just actually texted this to me. Luka is going to miss time with a wrist injury. Why does this matter? That's the Heat's next game. That's Sunday. As you mentioned, he's missed 2 of their visits, I believe. I remember because whenever he comes, the Slovenian crowd, this was even post-Dragic, comes out. There's a big Slovenian population in Miami, and they come out with the flags and the songs and all this kind of stuff. When Goran played against Luka, I think Luka's a rookie, that place was, there was an hour after the game that everybody was still at the arena. But I don't know if that crowd will come. They probably bought those tickets way in advance, and he's not going to be playing on Sunday. It doesn't appear. We'll see. We'll get more updates as we go forward. The Mavericks kind of struggling a little bit anyway in the Western Conference after making the finals as a surprise team last year. But we're going to do, though, we've got some days to pass here. We're still on the Shakira's Hip Slide break, where she was supposed to perform some concerts at the arena, and then she got basically too many people wanted to go, so they upgraded it to the stadium next year, but it left the Heat with these open dates, and so that's why we have all these dates to fill. Check out the episode that I did with our guy Adele, who covers a lot of our draft stuff on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, as well as Eternal, who runs our playback channel, and we got into the Khalil Ware pick in light of Dalton Connect and Jared McCain's starts to the season. So make sure you check that out. But today, Brady and I are going to get into the new starting lineup. What's old is new again, and we think it's going to stick for a little bit. Let's start with that, Brady. Let's start with that part of it. So the new starting lineup is Bam Adebayo, Haywood Highsmith, Jimmy Butler, Tyler Herro, Duncan Robinson. I guess Duncan Robinson, Tyler Herro, if you're going by positions. And Alex unearthed this before the last game, and Duncan was surprised when I actually mentioned it to him after the game that they'd only played 5 minutes together, this lineup, over 2 years. Like Duncan was like, we're together all the time. And the reality is they are together all the time because 4 of those 5 players are the still here players. They're from the 6 years of the so-called, as I call it, the Duncan Robinson build or the Jimmy Butler build, which is Jimmy, Bam, Duncan, Tyler, are the longest tenured Heat players. Actually, Bam is the longest tenured. Now Duncan's second. I guess it'd be Tyler third, Jimmy fourth, because Jimmy was acquired after the draft that year in 2019. And they basically put them with Highsmith, who now has a pretty long Heat tenure himself compared to some others and is on a 2-year contract. Do you think, first thing, Brady, that this will be the starting lineup even when Terry Rozier returns?
I do kind of get the feeling that's going to be the case. We've always seen in the past where they kind of find an opening to make these changes, like no matter what it is. Like they've done it with the Max Duncan thing. I remember there was like there's been so many UD games, but there was a UD game at some point when they pulled Kyle out of the starting lineup, and it was a kind of like a distraction where the whole focus of the day was on UD, so they kind of made that change that day. And it feels like they always just find a gap to make that change. And when you come off a game where Terry doesn't play and the starting lineup plays well together, and you have 5 to 6 days off, like I don't know how there's a better scenario than to try it out, than to come back off this where you watch the film, you kind of see what works. Terry gets healthy, and you say, all right, coming off this foot injury that's going to kind of be bothering you, we kind of work you back into things. We'll play off the bench and see what happens. It just seems like the thing to do. And I said it at before last game. It's like the only way you could really get away with doing this is if the starting lineup plays well. If they have if they look pretty strong on both ends of the floor, and then you could kind of really sell it and think you can go in that direction. And we saw that. Like it really jumped off the page, and it feels like it's something that you're going to have to lean into. Haywood, Highsmith, if Duncan and Tyler are starting, Haywood, Highsmith's the fifth starter. Like that's kind of like the 100% thing for me. He seems like the Haywood Jovic thing is obvious to me at this point. It seems like Haywood fits this team so much more when he's in there with the starting lineup. He can feed off of those guys, get relief baskets, play defense, do all of that. And Jovic is at a point where even though we've wanted him to, I think we trademarked him to start for so long because it was like the only way he'd play for a while there. It was like if he started, he'd play. If he didn't start, he wouldn't play. But he's at a point now where he's a really good player off the bench when he can kind of play his role and play a little more freely. So I think we're kind of at that point where that's kind of locked in now. The Tyler Duncan thing's always been the question. We haven't really seen both of them play at a high level at the same exact time. Usually it's been like one of them has a go and the other one's kind of, inconsistent, doing things at a different point. They're both clicking right now. So they're able to kind of play these guys together. And the thing that's intriguing me is they're able to run actions with them together. And actually, it's not just like them just out there at the same time. Like, no, they are being involved. They're in actions constantly. There's the 2-man game. There's the 3-man game with Bam. And this stuff's just working. Like you see the spacing it provides for Jimmy and Bam is kind of the whole idea of this for so long. It's why you've wanted to see it. You're seeing it. It was literally the second play of the game last game. It was a Jimmy Bam pick and roll where Jimmy goes to the middle of the floor. There's nobody in the corner. And the only reason Jimmy gets to like a free throw line pull-up jumper that he knocks down early in the game is because Tyler and Duncan are on that wing and corner. So he has just all the space in the world to operate in the middle of the floor. So that's the ideal state here. The question becomes, which I thought Dallas would be, a pretty good test, even though now Luka probably doesn't play. Defensively is always going to be the question. Can Jimmy, Haywood, and Bam make up for the stuff defensively that Tyler and Duncan don't get attacked? But I feel like I still think they can get mismatch on it. Like teams will still attack them because they're not going to go at Jimmy. They're not going to go at Haywood. They're not going to go at Bam. But I got to give those two guys credit because they've been better defensively this year. Like they have not – there hasn't been many games we walked away and said like, okay, they're just going at them at play after play. And we've said that a lot in the past. So they've been better team defensive-wise, but they haven't got attacked as much. And even if they do get attacked, I honestly don't care at this point. Like that's how good they've been offensively. Like they've been that good from beyond the arc and playing off each other. And it seems like their best minutes come when they're on the floor together, and specifically with Bam. Even though Bam has had it going, he deserves credit. He kind of makes that all go. So I'm at that point now. I think they have to kind of work off this starting lineup and see how far it gets them, ride the hot wave a little bit. And ideally, Terry finds his way off the bench in a kind of a more fitting role.
A few things you mentioned there have led to this, right? So, it's kind of like, well, Spo went back to the 4 guys that he's been around the longest. I mean, that could be the outside perception. And he did say, these guys know our core tenets. And so it is kind of like putting in your Heat culture carriers, essentially, the ones that are still here, who, again, know the organization, know what they're looking for, et cetera. And we've seen Tyler, who was the one wild card on this, and we've seen him adjust as well or better than anybody this season. So now you feel a comfort that these guys are going to try to carry that. But there was also a number of other factors you mentioned. One was Jovic being comfortable off the bench, which we did not know if that would be the case. Two, Rozier being bad in the starting lineup, which kind of has forced this. And then this side of mini break that you have in the season where you can do this. The defensive stuff, Tyler and Duncan being better than were anticipated, but also Terry not providing anything on that end. And so it's kind of like, well, what do you have to lose? You get a little bit more size in the backcourt, essentially. I mean, it's not like Terry and Tyler were locking anybody down, right? So now at least you get Haywood in the starting lineup and you have somebody to cover some of the point of attack stuff. And then also the other thing is Bam struggles, I think, have played into this. Like we've talked many times about getting Bam on the court with the players he's most comfortable with. And the guy he's most comfortable with in the world is Duncan Robinson. And so we've talked about stapling their minutes together. Well, this is an easy way to do it. I think the difference with this group and the other groups is, and again, I'm not saying this is going to last or this is the cure-all or anything, and it basically lasts until Jimmy gets hurt again, unfortunately. But I think when you look at what happened in the last game, Tyler and Duncan did not start the game shooting well. They were both bad early. But it was okay because Jimmy was carrying in the game. And then in the second half, there was time for Tyler and Duncan to find their shots and get in rhythm together. And I think that's the difference between this and the other starting lineup that we saw, the one with Rozier and Jovic in it, is that I think Spo will be more inclined to stay with this to allow Duncan and Tyler to find their games because there's a track record that they will, and he wants them to keep shooting. So I actually think we're not going to see as many situations where we saw like Jovic get pulled out of the starting lineup for the second half or them go with short minutes in the second half. Like he will lean into this. Now, my question on it is, does he close with it often? Or does that depend? Because look, Hawkins is not in the mix right now, but he's going to be back too. So we assume that Jovic is not going to be a regular closer. We talked about a Highsmith as potentially a closer, or Hawkins being a closer with this group. And does this mean Terry almost never closes?
I don't want to say that. I mean, we're at a low point with Terry in terms of the way he started the season, but I don't think it's like he's still one of those options late in games that can just get you a bucket, especially like in those close game closing situations. You want Terry out there if he's playing at the level that I think we know he could play at. It is situational as well. Like I think there's certain nights like Duncan just has it going, and you need to keep him on the floor not only for his shot making, but just solely for the fact that he can get spacing for these other guys, and you could work off different actions. Do I think they're going to go Tyler, Duncan, Tyler? Never. I don't think we'll ever see that. I don't think they're going to lean offense to that degree unless it's like a final possession where they have to get a shot up. I think Haywood's at a point where they kind of have to play him there. Jaime's the swing player here. I think he's kind of, as you mentioned, like I feel like they just trust him. They trust him late in games because he doesn't demand the ball. So they could work off Jimmy and Tyler there. But I think you want to have as many options on the floor as possible. So I feel like they're going to hit a point here late in the season. They're always going to lean defense, but they're going to hit a point where it is going to kind of be Duncan or Terry. And I don't think we were expecting that before the season when we were talking about closing lineups. It was never a Terry or Duncan thing. I even remember some people talking about Tyler or Duncan. Like that was the question at some points. Never Terry or Duncan. So this is kind of an interesting conversation. But it's probably a cop-out, but I think it's situational. Like the closing line is going to change based on matchups and the way guys are playing. But I don't think just because Terry's playing off the bench, he doesn't close. I 100% think he could close a bunch of games because the whole idea of playing him off the bench isn't like to just give him a demotion. Like this is to like make him better. This is to try to get him in a place where he starts playing better basketball and gets in some type of flow. All he needs, Ethan, is probably like a 2-game stretch where he plays well or shoots well.
Yeah.
Because I just think he needs his confidence back and he needs to get back to that in rhythm type of style. And I'm hoping that the bench kind of does that because it kind of pushes him in a direction that he kind of is forced to create. Right. He can't be just sitting around looking at Tyler, looking at Jimmy. He has to go. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, so it's going to be Terry. You have Jaime. And that's kind of a good starting point offensively to kind of work off those as primary options. I feel like that could work. and then Love, and then you could work off some of these other guys, and Jovic, obviously.
And Jovic, yeah.
So it's almost like this is a style point too, where they're putting Terry off the bench, and they can just play fast. Like, this is the lineup we're going to go. We have Kevin Love outlet passes. We have Jovic and Hawkins absolutely running down the floor every time we get a stop. And Terry, you just have to feed off that. Be the energy guy, and then see if they can catch a flow off that. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world to lean into.
Okay, so who is the fifth though in that group? Is that are you anchoring that with Jimmy? Because if you're anchoring with Tyler, then you're taking away the positive of Terry being able to kind of run it. You put him with Jimmy, they're going to play slower. You can't put Bam in with that group because you're already playing Love and Jovic. This was one of my concerns, is that you're playing more bigs. By the way, those who want Ware to play, to me, this pivot pushes Ware further back because you're going to play Jovic and you're not even starting Jovic. So he's got to find minutes for Jovic and Love off the bench now that Haywood is essentially going to be playing 4 minutes. And so to me, again, it makes it harder for him to play Ware. But is the 10th, I mean, he's not going to play a full 5, right? Like he doesn't typically do. And then who would that even be? Would that be? See, I think it should be Burks, to be honest. But I feel like it'll be Jay Rich and not Larson.
I think it should be Burks at this stage. Now, I'm not a fan of the 5 in, 5 out like lineups. Like there's going to be staggering here. Like I'm just kind of saying on the surface of what it'll look like. I honestly think you mentioned like Jimmy playing slower than those 4 guys, but like they don't need 5 absolute running gun guys. Like I think Jimmy could actually.
Well, they need a defender in there, right? I mean, because you're talking about Rozier, Love, Jovic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're gonna have Hawkins guard the best guy on the other team all the time. Like that, I'm not saying Burks is that either. See, this is where I think he may play Jay Rich.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that lineup in general feels like a zone type like lineup to me. Like that feels like the stretch where Love's sitting at the bottom of the zone at times. But either way, I think Jimmy fits that. I think Jimmy could play off that. I really like the idea. I felt that's why I said earlier in the season, I felt like they were waiting for Love to come back to kind of get back to this. But like the Love, I mean, Jimmy playing with Jovic and Love specifically, like a spacing wise, like I just think it makes sense. Like him playing with that second unit makes a whole lot more sense than the one early in the season when it was Thomas Bryant and Haywood Highsmith, and it was like not a lot of spacing, which is not usual for Jimmy. Like Jimmy needs a certain lineup, and Love being back kind of helps that. So I don't hate that. I mean, Terry, just because he's playing off the bench as well, it doesn't mean he's like I don't think he's just gonna take over the shot attempts. They don't want him to do that. Like I think they want him being put in a position where he's taking good shots, and I think they need a guy in there like Jimmy to kind of put him in that position. So I don't even want to make it sound like we're at the point now too, because it's like we sound like we're like staggering Tyler and Terry because that was like whole like thing before the season, but it's not for the same reasons that we said it before the season.
Right.
It's for totally different reasons. It's because Tyler's playing so well and Terry just needs some type of jolt in his own lineup. But it is at the point we're at. I think I do think that makes more sense here. And like I said before, I don't know if you could get a better scenario than right now to make this change. Like if you don't make this change now, when are you going to make it?
Well, on the other side of this, we're going to get into what the change after this would be, because I feel like it's nothing with this team is ever permanent, and a lot of it is injury based. But what you're talking about, if they're going to make that bench lineup work, and I think you're probably right, he probably will be Jimmy that they put with him for the most part. Then Terry and Jimmy have got to figure out the whole chemistry thing. And there have been times that it's looked okay. But I agree with you. I think Terry just needs a couple of games where he's allowed to kind of play his way out of this, but play his way out of it in a way that doesn't damage them significantly. So that's kind of where we're at with it. All right, on the other side of this, we are going to get into, again, what the move after this might be. I want to mention another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at Water. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're going to have to do that today. Erik Rubenstein, our friend Erik Rubenstein. You can find him at erikrubenstein.com. If you're injured in a car accident, after you make sure that you're okay, everyone around you is okay, reach out to Erik. Okay, he will help you out. 877-829-ERIC. Again, that's 877-829-3742. Went to St. Thomas University after he grew up in Lauderhill. He's a South Florida guy. Big Miami Heat fan. You'll see him at all the games. Most important thing, though, is he will help you get your money. I guess so. Reach out to him, 877-829-ERIC, or check him out at Attorney Rubenstein on Instagram. All right, so what is the move after the move? In other words, if this doesn't work, because it starts to get sort of a Titanic deck chairs feeling here. if he has to tweak it again. I mean, do you see any way Rozier plays his way back into the starting lineup?
I don't think it's crazy. I think he could, but I think if in the scenario that you're presenting, like if he plays his way back into the starting lineup, it's because he just had like a really good stretch off the bench. And why are you changing that at that point? Like if he struggled during the season and now he finds his footing, it almost feels like you need to keep it the same to kind of ride out the rotation the way it's rolling. So what would be the next change? I'm trying to think because Haywood, I don't think would be one of the changes. I think this makes sense for this roster. I think it balances out the roster well enough that I don't think that would be the change. The only change would be if Duncan goes through a shooting dip and it's like he's not shooting as well, and then they just need a jolt and they maybe try something else. Maybe if Terry's playing well off the bench and they pair Duncan with Terry off the bench and they go with something else, like they put Jaime at the 2 or something and they go bigger. I don't know. Like that would feel like maybe the next one if they just want to get really weird. But if in this scenario that if it's like Terry starts playing really well, I don't think it's like, okay, he gets his promotion back. I think that they have to just figure out what works well in the balance of this team. But it's interesting because I think they have to kind of roll this out for as long, like as much as we talk about the 4 guys playing well together or playing for so long together. Like this, as Alex mentioned, like it's been so short of minutes. Like we haven't got to see us for long periods of time that I think they have to at least see what's here until somebody goes down or something. Like they have to ride out this lineup to see what's there possibly. And I thought it was interesting. I asked Spo about it after last game. I was asking him kind of about like what the difference is now with being able to play Tyler and Duncan compared to like how many years it's been since they haven't been linked up. And he was pretty much saying like the growth in their games has allowed this. Like the fact that Tyler cut out the mid-ranges, and he's just become a much better outside shooter in terms of volume. You have Duncan, who's added the inside game that pretty much opens everything else up. And it's at a point now where they've both grown, and I think the silent point there was that they have both grown defensively to some degree, that you're able to kind of roll this out, and now he can lean into it. And I think now the fact that he can finally lean into this in like year 6, I don't think he's going to go away from it as quickly as we think. Like, I think he's going to try to figure this out for as long as possible. So I guess I don't know what the next move would be after this. I mean, it depends on who's playing well. It feels like there's no sure thing with this team. The fact they're playing 12 guys on a nightly basis, and whoever the best 8 are, he rolls out in the second half. So the more of the changes to me don't feel like the starting lineup. It's more going to be on the bench. I just think it's more about the depth.
Yeah.
It's like Pella's playing well. Can we find a spot for Pella even when Jaime's playing? It's we want Jay Rich in there because the defensive purposes, but you need to play Burks. Like this guy, Alex Burks comes in and is effective every time he comes in, and you need the shooting off the bench. Like I think those are the decisions that are kind of need to be figured out probably before the starting lineup. And hopefully, if they could roll out this Terry thing, maybe those pieces start to connect a little bit easier when they say, okay, now that we have like a for sure rotation and Terry's playing well off the bench, we could put this guy next to him. Burks plays well off of Terry, and et cetera, et cetera. So they just need a baseline. Like we can't keep doing the predicting thing. Like we have to see it, and then they can figure it out from there.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a surprise that this original starting lineup he went out with didn't last very long. We talked about the concerns with it, and then the numbers started backing up. The metrics backed it up. It just wasn't very good together. All right, so the one kind of elephant in the room here, though, on the bench, so let's address this before we go, is Jay Rich. And there's an interesting narrative turn that's happened here because, he went from sort of beloved Rook 2. Even at the time, there were some, I was concerned about it too. I've acknowledged this, about what he might become and whether what you package with him in a trade for Jimmy Butler and all the rest of that. And obviously, history is told that they did exactly the right thing when they went out and got Jimmy Butler and used Josh Richardson as the primary piece to do it. They bring Josh back on a minimum contract. And then he gets hurt last year as he's just starting to kind of find his form, at least offensively, in terms of the mid-range. And then he hurts the shoulder. It takes a while to come back from the shoulder, something he hadn't dealt with before. They work him back in, and he's given rotation minutes. But the numbers across the board and the eye test have not been good. Is it a project worth salvaging at this point? Is there a point where you see he'll improve to the degree that he improved last year, where he can be a useful player for them? And what does it look like if he decides to play him with Rozier in the backcourt? Because then you're starting to feel like, okay, now there's just redundancy there for no reason. in my view, and that's why I say you just play Burks.
I think Josh Richardson is like a perfect insurance piece for this team. And the issue is it's just they're not using him like that. Like I feel like if there's like a certain hole that needs to be filled, he's the guy that you can kind of throw in there for some spot minutes and see what you get. And if he has it going on a certain night, you keep him in. And if not, you go back to your regular rotation. But we've seen him kind of in this regular rotation now. You mentioned the Terry Rozier thing. So here's a really funny stat. Because you mentioned him kind of next to him. Terry Rozier and Josh Richardson have played 23 minutes together so far this season. 98 offensive rating, 133 defensive rating. It's a negative 35 net rating. So I don't know. Ideally, if you're going off stats here, I don't know if that's the right way to go. On the flip side, Alec Burks and Terry Rozier, 31 minutes, 133 offensive rating, 105 defensive rating. It's a 28 net rating. So
Directly
you're seeing
flipped.
It's a total flip between those two. And I mean, I test, as you said before, like I think that fits it as well. Like if you're playing Terry off the bench, I think Burks fits in so much more to that lineup just for spacing purposes and everything. And Jay Riches seems like the better option to be on the outside of the rotation that could just plug in if like you need a spark. Like if you want something like just to like wreck some things defensively, play at the top of a press, see if he gets hot from outside, scoring wise, like that's the ideal role for him. I like that a lot actually. Like if they could do that on certain nights. But this Burks thing, that every time he comes in, he's effective, and he still finds a way, like totally cold. Like he comes in totally cold every game and still finds a way to work his way into things. Like it feels like you got to give him some rotation minutes at some point, because if he keeps playing like this, it's the numbers back it up clearly.
Well, and Burks is not an elite ball handler by any means, but it reminds me a little bit of he's like James Jones with a little bit of a handle. And going back to sort of the big 3 days where Spo would use James Jones as sort of that plug-in, and, he wouldn't play for 3 weeks, and stay ready. And then all of a sudden he'd come off and hit 4 threes. I just think with this particular team, they need more than that. And it's unfortunate with Jay Rich where the narrative arc is gone, because he's been such a popular Heat player. It's not that he's markedly worse than he used to be. I don't know that the one thing that we always sort of talked about with him was the point of attack defense, and I don't see it consistently enough to make it worth it to play him. And that gets to one more question before we go, because I haven't played this, and I probably should have at this point. I had a chance to talk to Drew Smith on the side the other day. I mean, would you look there? Maybe with Terry, or plug in Drew for some defensive point of attack minutes, because I don't know, the shot looks better to me. I talked to him about the shot, and he talked about all the work he's put in with it. It's never going to be a work of art, but I mean, knocked down a couple in the last game. Is he, other than Haywood, the best point of attack defender on this team?
If you're not, I'd still put Bam up there. But
Bam, okay, Bam,
yeah. But I agree. I totally agree. Do I love Terry and Drew? No, I think it's a little too small. I still feel like I just don't love that. My hot take before the season when we were doing that podcast was that Heat fans would go from hating Drew Smith to loving Drew Smith. Like he would kind of come around on some fans, and it feels like that's happening here a little bit. Like you're just kind of seeing him play in these spot minutes. Like the fact that you can come in a game with Burks, like totally cold, and be effective like that, and just come in and the offense has always been the thing. Like if he could just hit a few threes, like if they help off, like the defense is really something. Like you mentioned the point of attack, like he gets deflections, he gets steals, like he is always at 100 level of pressure. So I don't think it's I think he's also another player that, as much as people used to joke around about, I think he's a really good spot minutes guy. Like when you need a spark, exactly with what they did the other night. Like that's ideally with what you want there. But I still am not. I'm not with the Drew Smith, Terry Rozier thing, especially because we're thinking about Drew Smith and Terry on their best night. But what about when Terry's a little inefficient here? And
that's a 7 minute scoring drought.
Yeah, that's a net rating disaster. So I think there's Burks, not just because of the numbers, but I just think he fits there a little bit more. And Burks playing with the way he plays off the ball, I just think it allows Terry to probably play his game a little more. So they're at a position here where they're just trying to find every player's spot where they're most comfortable, where they're going to be put in their best position. And they found that with Duncan and Tyler, they found that with Haywood and Jovic, and now it's just about finding that with Terry. And ideally, that place is as a 6-man where he's working off some of these other guys off the ball.
Well, Drew Smith is going through a different narrative arc. It's the Haywood Highsmith narrative arc, where nobody understood why he was playing or what his value was, and everybody talked about how low his ceiling was, including us. Could he be functional enough offensively at any point to be put on the floor? At one point, Haywood had the worst metrics of any offensive player in the league, I think 2 years ago when they played him. And now, again, when they need comfort food, they go back to Haywood Highsmith as a starter. So I'm not saying that's going to be what's going to happen with Drew here, but you're seeing a little bit of this, and it's. I never thought I would see the day that people were calling for Drew Smith to play ahead of Josh Richardson. Anyway, Brady, appreciate it. You can follow me at Brady Hawk 305. Maybe we'll do a little bit more on Drew over the next couple of days. I do plan to play that clip because I got 3 minutes on the side with him after the game the other day, and nobody really talks to Drew about his journey or anything like that because I think most Heat fans thought he'd be gone by now, and he's not. And actually, he's outplayed some other guys when he's gotten an opportunity to play. All right, check out our sponsors. Underdog, use the code 5FIVE, and also our friend Erik Rubenstein. You had a car accident, reach out to him right away at erikrubenstein.com.